Okay. Hello, MTAV1s. This is your final topic for the module. Um, it's about 2 and 3 part form. This is a very old set of notes, and you'll see that there are other things in here too. 1 part form and bar form and a couple of other things that we will not be focusing on at the moment. It's just the 2 part forms and the 3 part forms that we will be focusing on. And just a reminder yet again, this course is based on on a study of 18th century tonal music, which is sort of the textbook language for tonal music as it developed thereafter. So we are looking at the way in which this is about the period when instrumental music sort of emerged to the forefront of the development of tonal music. So this is the time when particular kinds of distinctive forms started emerging out of instrumental music and formed the basis for a lot of things after the 18th century that happened in instrumental music in the 19th century and in the 20th century. So that's why we're starting with those instrumental forms that are called 2 part and 3 part. Now, I know that you did this at school as well, so a lot of this will be revision for you. I might be using slightly different terminology, so it's just a question of getting used to the different words, and then you should be fine. And along with that goes the assignment, which I sent to you a while back, the assignment on binary and ternary forms, which you will need to do after completion of this lecture. The due date for the submission of all marks is towards the end of November, early December. So I will set as the absolute final date for the submission of all your assignments, not only this form assignment, but those of you that are behind with your other assignments, and a lot of you are. The absolute final date on which I can accept assignments will be Wednesday, the 24th of November, because I need that week at the end of November to mark everything, to submit it to the moderator, to check your marks and so forth. So you will have had in 4 assignments. The first one was on ornamental chords A, the second one was on ornamental chords B, the third one was on modulation, question 1, and this 4th one then is on binary and ternary forms. And then in addition to that, you had those 2 small worksheets that I will also include in your mark, but obviously it will count, proportionately less than the assignments do. Okay, so you can leave out 1 part form for now. It's something we can come back to in your 2nd and 3rd year. We are looking just at the 2 parts and the 3 parts. So we start with the idea of simple binary or simple 2-part. This is a term applied, I'm just going to read through some of the text with you first. Applied to a composition consisting of 2 sections or parts, importantly separated by a double bar and designated as A, double bar with 2 little dots on either side, B, if, as is usually the case, each of these sections is repeated. So that in fact when it is performed, it goes A, repeat, B, repeat, A, A, B, B. All right, so you write it as it's written, the composer writes it as A, and there's a double bar, and then there's B. But then normally it says dot dot, meaning finish A and go back and play A again. And then there's a dot on that side, meaning play B, finish it and go back and play B again. So that in fact when it is performed, it's performed like that. So it is the presence of that thing that divides the music into 2 bits. That's why it's called 2-part or binary. Simple 2-part form is encountered throughout the history of tonal music. So starting from the 18th century and starting from the Baroque through the classical and into the 19th century, especially apparent in instrumental pieces derived from dance types. So that is really where instrumental music finds its sort of model in Baroque music, because up to the Baroque period, remember, vocal music had been the predominant form of music because church music had been the predominant form of Western tonal music. So instrumental music was really a sort of on the back burner for a very long time. So when it became a much more popular kind of music and composers began to spend more time composing pieces for instrumental ensembles or for solo instruments, they turned to the models that existed, which was very much the music that existed for dancing in that time. Folk dancers as well as courtly dancers, for the more highfalutin types. So they were dance types that were used as a basis or an inspiration really for combinations in the Baroque period, such as the Baroque suite. I'm sure you know about the Baroque suite, where they included a collection of typical dances of the time, like the allemande, the sarabande, the courante, the gigue. Each of these pieces had a very typical kind of character, a style. Like the jig was very much a kind of a happy, upbeat, skipping kind of piece. Dum, da, dum, da, dum, da, dum, da, dum, da, that kind of piece. Whereas the sarabande was a slow dance with a emphasized second beat. Dum, 2, 3, 1, 2. That. So each of these dance types had a style that was taken over by the Baroque composers of the time. And then they would write a collection of them and call it a suite, or sometimes a partita, or sometimes a sonata da camera. It had different names, but it was essentially based on the dance forms of the time. And then in that tradition of writing pieces in the style of existing dance forms was revived, especially in the 19th century, by the German composers. So people like Schubert wrote Ländler. It's a kind of Austrian dance, or the Deutsche Tänzer, German dancers, and so forth. And Chopin, as you know, with his Polish roots, liked to write pieces based on the Polish dance forms as well. So what is a simple binary form? You'll notice that under each of the different forms that I discuss, I use these three words, page 3, macrothematic, macrorhythmic, and macrotonal. So what does macro? Macro means, like the shop, it means big. Macro is big. Okay, so it's referring to the big dimensions of the piece. Like the whole of section A is a macro unit. The whole of section B is a macro unit. So the macrorhythmic, perhaps I can start with that one. As opposed to normal rhythm, where we would say rhythm consists of strong beats and weak beats and of notes of different duration, like minims and crotchets and quavers and so forth. When we talk about macro, we mean long durations of music. In other words, like, everything up to the point where the music comes to a rest. Like if I say there's a section A, and then there's a double bar and a repeat sign, and then there's a section B. That whole thing, from there up to where you stop in the middle, is one macrorhythmic, one big duration of music. That's what macrorhythmic means, a big duration. And there's another macrorhythmic unit. Okay, that's macrorhythmic. So macrothematic would essentially connect with that. What is the overall thematic? What tune or tunes are contained in this material, and what tune or tunes are contained in that material? That is its macrothematic design. And macrotonal has to do with it's the relationship between the beginning of the piece, what tonality is that, as opposed to that tonality, as opposed to that tonality, as opposed to that tonality. Where does it start and end, basically? Those are your macrotonal structure. And essentially, the typical design for a binary form or two-part form is that macrotonally it will start being what we call harmonically closed, and it will move at the central cadence at the end of the first macrorhythmic unit. It will be harmonically open. Then it will start harmonically open and it will go back to harmonically closed at the end. Harmonically closed, what does that mean? It is represented by the tonic chord in the home key. That's what harmonically closed means. The tonic chord in the home key. Everything else is harmonically open. So you can be harmonically open at the end of section A if you end on a half cadence. So you can still be in the tonic key, but you end on the dominant chord. Then that's harmonically open. Or section A can actually modulate to another key. Then that would also be, even if it's the tonic of another key, it's still called harmonically open because it's not the tonic of the home key. Only the tonic of the home key is harmonically closed. So you can modulate, and typically these forms will modulate. If section B ends in if section A ends in another key, it will be the dominant key. If the home key is major or minor, it could be either. And I've given you a number of examples that you can look at. Or it will be, if you're in a minor key, it will be a modulation to the relative major. That can also occur quite frequently. And then in some 19th century pieces, you get some very unusual kinds of key relationships as well. Okay, so before I continue, I think perhaps we should just have a look at some of the examples I've included for you at the end of the document. So go to page 10 at the end of the document, and I've given you some examples of simple binary forms that you can have a look at. All right, I'm starting with a classical piece. This is by Haydn. In fact, we did this piece as an example of modulation as well the other day. So you will remember this piece. So what you need to do when you're asked to analyze something like this is you have to start with what you did in the first semester. You have to start by identifying your home key. This is the home key of E minor. Can you hear that's E minor? So there it's harmonically closed. It's the tonic of E minor. And then you must look at your phrases, and you must look at your subphrases, and you must look at your period markings, and then according to that you must mark your cadences. So we're starting harmonically closed, tonic of E minor. Half cadence, 4-bar phrase, onto the dominant of E minor. Then we start with an upbeat dominant of E minor, onto tonic. And this is where we had the pivot chord modulation, remember, bar 6. The A minor chord is subdominant of E minor, and it's supertonic of G major. And then we have the dominant 7th of G major. So we have a perfect authentic cadence in G major, but because it's not the home key, we would say that's harmonically closed, and this is harmonically open. And then typically we go through what's called a period of kind of tonal flux. We start here in G major. And there we get to the, so here we start in G major, and by the time we get to that phrase there, end of the phrase, we are on the dominant of E minor again. So we anticipate the return of E minor. And there it comes back. So we start harmonically open, then we get to the dominant of the home key, we stay basically harmonically open until we get that distinct sense of the tonic chord and the return of the home key, and we end harmonically closed. Okay, so that's your classical one, and this is an example of a romantic one. Unfortunately, this particular example doesn't show the accompaniment, but it does show the chord progression. We're in B flat major, and we're starting, it's a Brahms piece, and we're starting, it's a Ländler, it's a dance, and it's starting on the median note. the supertonic chord and the dominant, and then a submediant chord and the dominant, okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that gives us our period, and there's a double bar and repeat signs, so we know all of that belongs together, and I mark it as a period. Then we continue. Again, the section B normally starts harmonically open then with a what we call a secondary dominant. You can see the author of this text has marked it as a dominant seventh of the submediant, in other words of the G minor chord. Submediant, deceptive cadence. Then we go to the dominant of the dominant. Is it the median? And then the dominant. This is the tonic, but we're not at a perfect authentic cadence. We're far imperfect authentic. So there's an extension which allows us to go D, do. So we have another melodic period, da, 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 4 bars, da, da, dum, da, dum, ba, dum, ba. And then da, 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 ya, da, da, dum. And then an extension, bum, bum, bum. An extended period with slightly more phrases. Okay, so it's important that you mark your phrases and your cadences and you know which keys you are in. And you can clearly see I've started on the tonic of B flat and I've ended on the tonic of B flat. But here you can see that whereas the typical closed open closed of the Baroque and the classical period doesn't always get adhered to in the Romantic period. Here you can see Brahms has actually stuck with a tonic chord and a 5/1 cadence in B flat. So section A also actually closes as harmonically closed. So you do get your exceptions, particularly in Romantic music. Here's 2 more examples. We don't have to go through all of them, but I do want to show you what you can see the difference here, and it's mentioned in the notes, is that sometimes you will have what we call a symmetrical design. If you count the number of bars here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, section A, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, well, slightly longer, 9, 10. So section B is slightly longer. Section B here is also slightly longer because of that extension. Here you can see you've got one that is virtually symmetrical. A and B are virtually the same. But here you can just look at the music and you can see there's the double bar and repeat sign. So section A is only up to there, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then you can see that section B is almost double the length of section A. So that is another variable aspect of the macro-rhythmic design of simple binary, simple 2-part, is that it is, let me just find it for you in the notes, is that it